when you set up the capital stack in the traditional institutional way, I think that's a positive thing for everyone. I think in particular for our types of developments and the people that we're interacting with that don't know these things, I think that it's a benefit to them to understand the way that the capital stack works and the way that the alignment of incentives is set up so that it's for the investor's benefit.
Earlier today, we were talking about how the first hours in tend to be the last hours out, right? And so on. And then the last hours in, being the debt, tend to be the first hours out. So on the back end of the project, how have you seen that work? Because in the models, we've built in a cash sweep, right? And we're building a for sale product, which is different than large mixed use rental, which is most of your experience, where you've explained that all of a sudden you have a huge building with real cash flow coming in, but you have all these capital pieces involved, and they're owed different money at different pieces of time, but you can't just all at once pay everyone back. I don't know if you want to go into how that works, whether that be on our project or your previous projects.
So in the financial models and in the legal documents, you can't pay everyone back at the same time, or at least the way that you set up your structure within the legal document says who's going to get paid first. And in the model, you're setting up formulas that say exactly the same things as the legal docs do,
yeah.
right? Or oftentimes you write your model and then you try to negotiate to make sure that you get your legal docs set up in the same way your formulas are already working. And that's a big part of the reason that we have to have analysts in the positions is as these things evolve, you remodel it. But functionally, like in reality, a lot of times with a development project, it does all get paid at the same time, right? Because it is one big recapitalization event or one big sale where the bank gets all their money, the partners get all their money, or all the investors and LPs and the GP, everybody gets their money at the same time. But even then, you're still running through that list and saying the first people that get paid are the lenders, right? So the lenders get paid first. Once all of that money runs out, then you start to work your way through returning the money of the investors, and then all that gets paid out. And then you have your preferred equity component or your preferred return for your LPs that gets paid, and then the sponsor, right? So it's really like almost exactly reverse order of the way that the money came in. And that's because of the risk profile and the alignment of the interests. So the lender comes in last, gets paid first. The larger equity components were somewhere in the middle, and they get their money in the middle, and then sponsor gets paid last.
Yeah, and there's almost a science that was created just based off of where others could place their money. And then in development with the risk profiles, right? You have the loan at a certain rate, and then you have the pref equity set at a certain rate. And you ultimately get to the sponsor who has the most upside, but because they're getting their dollars last, have the most incentive to keep the project expenses low and the revenue at the end high.
Yeah. And when I first started in development, I didn't realize the emphasis, right? So from my bosses and from the LPs even, really more from my bosses and the investors in the GP component, how much focus they had on making sure that the project made sense, that we were not wasting money, and that we were going to put together a project that really made money. And every 0.01% of the IRR actually matters. And that you can't, if you make a small cap rate adjustment, fix your pro forma by making like a little cap rate adjustment, that doesn't really solve problems.
Oh, no,
because
not at all.
At the beginning of a project, you can project a lot of things, but if it doesn't come to reality, and if the project sponsor is not fully invested in making that come to fruition the way that you're expecting it to, those are their dollars. The first dollars that you waste are the profit of the sponsor, right? And so every dollar that's wasted is the sponsor's dollar. And over time, while working in an analyst position and then up through the years, And after several conversations with real developers, and now obviously sitting in that same seat, you realize, oh, that's my dollar that's being wasted if I do this the wrong way. And so the incentives really do get lined up properly when you set up the capital stack in the traditional institutional way. And I think that's a positive thing for everyone. And I think in particular for our types of developments and the people that we're interacting with that don't know these things, I think that it's a benefit to them to understand the way that the capital stack works and the way that the alignment of incentives is set up so that it's for the investor's benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Capital stack. It's interesting and even more interesting when it comes to development. You were explaining how, like, I was asking about the cash sweep idea and that, like, there's money set, like, I was more thinking about how there's money set aside for operations at the end for some of the rental product or like big mixed use, right? Where the bank isn't going to take all the money immediately because they understand that you need the money to.
Like we were talking about yesterday, you mean, or at least I'm connecting the conversation yesterday to that in the handoff between construction and operations.
Yeah.
Because the construction loan and the financing of the project had a fixed cost, has a fixed term, et cetera. And then you have to transition into an operational period where it's not investor dollars coming in, right? It's still part of the same overall entity structure, but it's not the investor dollars necessarily. It's cash flow that you're then utilizing. And that cash flow can either go to repay the bank, it can go to operations, it can be paid out to your investors if you hit a certain threshold, right? And so that's what you were asking about?
Yeah.
But yeah, so with the cash flow from the properties, it's a whole different thing, right? Is when can you even start to repay your investors when you have cash flow from the property? Because you're going to have things in your loan that restrict how that money gets handled and what you can do with it. And to your point about not everybody doesn't get paid back in one lump sum. So when you have a construction loan, or even when you bring in equity partners for a development project, they still want to have some sort of a repayment or a recapitalization event, right? So your construction loan might be 2 years, or it might be 3 years, or you might have extensions, whatever the case is. But because of that risk profile that we've been talking about, the construction loan probably has a higher interest rate that's associated with it. And you as a developer want to repay that. And so you want to transition that into a stabilized loan, or at a minimum, some sort of a bridge loan that's not construction, and the lender is only accounting for lease up or tenant improvements or commissions, like things like that. And so you're looking at whichever way it is that you can pay off your construction loan to reduce your interest cost and transition into the new phase of the project and prior to sale. In our case, currently we have for sale product, and the sale dollars are just going to go directly to paying off the loan and to paying back investors. So we don't have to have a recapitalization and a refinancing event necessarily. So if you do have one of those events, you probably still will also have some sort of loan covenants and requirements from the loan that are going to tell you that if you're not meeting operational thresholds where you have a sufficient profitability, then you're not allowed to pay your investors. And so we can call that a lockbox, right? So the money is going into a lockbox that is still restricted by the bank, and you have certain documentation that you're going to have to deliver to the bank to prove to them that you're sufficiently profitable, whether that's total dollars that have accumulated in there, or maybe it's on a month-to-month basis, or it's over the course of the previous 6 months, you've done well enough that then the bank will say, okay, we're willing to release X number of dollars to the investors. And as the developer, the sponsor of the project, or if you're just doing a regular acquisition, you still might have those requirements where you need to understand all of the components of the loan that you're dealing with to be able to manage the relationship with the bank, manage the operations of the property, and fulfill your obligations and to do right by your investors.